Hello and welcome back, everybody. Actually, welcome to me, I guess. It's been a couple of months since I've been on St. Louis YouTube channel. I have been around, but not on YouTube because the classes that I teach when I'm in town are not YouTubeable, I guess. Okay. They're kids classes. Okay. Yeah, so the big thing that I want to talk about is, thank you, Caleb, for allowing me to do the GM choice because this is my spring break week and I'm in town for the most of it. But I really wanted to just kind of circle back to some of the classic ideas and how you can try to implement them in your games. So I'm going to use one of the games that I played recently as an example, and that's going to be a Nimzo-Indian game. So Chess Bunzo will know it because I already showed that game to him. But and he actually played a couple nice games like that too. So if you watch his streams, you may see some of those too. Sorry, I'm putting you on spot. But the first YouTube video that I did for the club was also a very nice Nimzo as black that I played. So I thought this would be a nice way to also use that as an example. So you can definitely find that link somewhere down below.
It's in the description. In
the description. Thank you, Ben Simon. So, without further ado, I'm going to jump in. I'm still going to talk a while during it, so don't worry about that. But the big thing that we want to do is show classical and where I potentially messed up a little and where I did great or where I could have done better. So those are the big things that we want to try to keep in mind. Now, let's see the game. So this was a game that I played in Pan Am's. Well, actually, long story short, I used to be at SLU, but then I got into medical school, moved to Mizzou. Mizzou's like an hour and a half, okay, actually hour 45 away. Learned how to drive because I got into Mizzou, that was weird. And so I don't live in St. Louis anymore, but I'm in town every like 2 to 3 weeks just for a weekend. So I play for a Mizzou team now. Wait, actually, I should be showing off the jacket, I guess. There we go. Hopefully this will make my new coach very happy. But yeah, so this was the first Pan Am that I played for them, and it was pretty fun. It was in Seattle, it was very rainy, but it was a really cool game. I really enjoyed this specific game because it kind of gave me that nice idea that just because I wasn't 100% up to date on my openings, it didn't mean that I can't play decent chess. So I'm talking about that because I don't practice openings as much as I used to when I was playing super professionally and I was playing like, 400 games a year. So I don't do those anymore, but I still try to keep up to date with opening trends and like tricky stuff. But I would prefer to play something less theoretic based and more ideas and more like comfort and like more like I love to grab a nice center. I want to be able to keep my king safe. I want to have like tension in the center. I want to develop my pieces places that I know they belong. So I try to keep more my like opening principles rather than some crazy cool move that I don't understand and it needs to be like engine based. This doesn't mean that you can't do that. You definitely can. As long as you know exactly what you're doing engine based, that is totally fine. Just make sure that you spend enough time to learn the engine moves, the master games, those. Okay, I have a question about what would I do against Queen C2. I've actually experienced a lot with it. I go back and forth. A lot of times, if my opponent doesn't necessarily know what I will be playing, I play Knight C6 in Queen C2 because I've just had a good experience with this line, especially in like a little bit lower levels, because I can try to easily get a nice center like this, open up my bishop, and in my experience, they tend to also try to close up the center, which is great. That's exactly what I want, which means I can try to do a kingside attack. So again, Queen C2, Knight C6 is not one of the top engine recommended moves. It's a playable move, and it's like 1,000 master games, but Castle is the main line, D5 is pretty cool, C5 is pretty cool. I chose Knight C6. I still go back and forth between the lines, but Knight C6, if somebody played against me right now, I would probably go for Knight C6. Oh my god, they're gonna use this against me. Yeah, like F3 is another cool one. F3 requires more theory-based, and Caleb keeps or at least kept playing this when I played a couple games with him, and it was not fun. I've experienced a lot with F3 too, but today I want to focus more on this specific pawn structure. I have a pretty cool book recommendation. It's by Ivan Sokolov. I think it's called Winning Middle Game Ideas, I think. And it does cover this specific pawn structure and and then this specific like ideas pretty nicely. I didn't go into all of the book because some of the chapters just were not I would never play them. But I remember this chapter wasn't there and I like that. So I like to play this early c5. Now, my whole strategy is based on these two pawns. So what I intend to do is long term, I am never ever probably going to take this unless it's a guarantee for me to eat c4. So my big plan is to try to develop like this, try to potentially throw in a rook c8. I know there's a lot of arrows, and potentially make this rook attack on c4. So that would be the only time I would take on d4 to attack on c4. But that's kind of the general idea. Now, I may or may not play d6 because sometimes this d6 square will be useful for other pieces right on the pawn. So, keeping that in mind, this is a very clear weakness for my opponent. But this by no means is like a guaranteed win for me. I mean, white is still surviving playing. There's nothing wrong with white. They do have to be very more aggressive with their pawn attacks. So they gotta start pushing these E, F, and if they can start F5, E5, if they start attacking on kingside, I'm busted. So like you need to, like I as black need to be very careful about the move order that I'm presenting. So yeah, so those are the general ideas to keep in mind. My opponent played pawn E3, and if I'm not mistaken, he was like 1900 USCF, so he had a very respectable rating. There was nothing wrong. Like I mean, he's also a college, student, and I think he was Stanford A or B. And like, if my online checkup pans out correctly, I think he was like studying some PhD in biochemistry. Or anyways, so again, he was also not a very professional chess player, so I didn't expect him to know everything there is to know about this position, but he did know enough. So I say that because he is correctly developing, he's trying to set up for e4, and he's not necessarily rushing into knight f3. Knight f3 is totally fine too. So he went knight e2, which again makes total sense. He's trying to push the f and e pawn. Now, the one thing that I do want to emphasize is if my opponent had played e4, I would need to be more careful because this is about to come up. So, question for chat and audience. What do you think we should do here as black?
H6.
Sorry?
H6.
Possible, but I wouldn't play it because I think h6 gives more weakness. My opponents will definitely want to start pushing stuff on kingside. So I would rather not touch these pawns unless I know for sure. Oh, I remember Patrick from way before in the chat.
D6.
Again, possible, but it doesn't stop bishop g5. We want to make sure that we're not dealing with bishop g. We're like dealing with bishop g5. We're not allowing it too easily. Too many people in the chat are saying d6 now. Patrick, yes, the classical idea is to do these, but I don't think that this is like, that's the idea, but it doesn't mean you have to do it right away. It is a little slow, I agree. So try to keep your focus on bishop g5. How can we try to deal with it?
What if you put it back on knight e8, knight to d6?
I like that, yes. Knight e8. Chat is also catching up. I see Chess Boom's also making a smile like I know this. Yeah, knight e8. Another problem that knight e8 stops is this, because if you play f4, I will play f5. And I remember I saw this a bunch of classical games. I want to say like 10 years, maybe 12 years ago, from a coach that I had back in Iran, that he showed me like how this pawn got pushed, and like even when black played f6, it was still extremely uncomfortable. So it's really important to try and avoid these. Now, my opponent didn't play e4 immediately. He castled, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to play knight e8. There is nothing specifically wrong with knight e8, but bishop a6 is a little bit more convenient, because I'm going to wait for e4, then I would play knight e8. This is pretty much what happened in the game anyways, but the move order, I think it matters. So if you will play this in your own game, maybe start with bishop a6, then knight e8. And just to kind of go a little bit deeper and give you some examples of some cool games, some of the games that I found is like Carlsen played Naka in 2020 and he lost. So Naka won this as black. The way that game was played, I believe, was take, and I believe here g6 was played. And Naka just kind of, these two pawns are super weak, so he just kind of reorganized his power. And I mean, the game went on longer, but I just kept the game as this much in the chat, in my notation. So feel free to look that game up yourself. So again, this was a game that Carlsen Naka played in 2020. Actually, this was a Carlsen Tour final. Cool. Another game, if you want to try to think a little bit, I guess, more recent / younger generation, is Pragnananda versus Esipenko, and they played knight e7 here. I would prefer g6 just because I have more experience with that g6 line, and I really want to try to get that knight out there. But this was also a very interesting game. It kind of turned out to be a bust for Esipenko, though. This was 2020 Tata still. So again, I don't think knight e7 was the reason that Esipenko got a little whoopsie-doopsie in this game, but g6 makes complete sense to me, because every time that they're attacking this g6, because you may try to go knight g7 at some points and protect it that way, and we will look at my game too so we can compare, but I'm kind of trying to give you other points of comparison as well. So there's this yeah, so let's see, there was another line that I also wanted to talk about. Yeah, if knight g3 early. This was another game that was a little bit older, and it was also a rapid game, so again, it doesn't question the accuracy, but just kind of to give you all the information. You can see how close they all look, like the pawn structures, the attacks on c4, c3, and so this was a game between Ivan Sokolov, the guy who I mentioned wrote the cool book, and Alexander Grischuk, and this was a rapid game that was played in 2007. So keep that in mind as well, in case you want to have a more comprehensive database. Anyways, back to the game. I went knight e8, he played e4. I think I should have played bishop a6 first. I think that would have been more comfortable. I played f5, but let me just give you more information about bishop a6. Next move, I played bishop a6. So again, I transposed into this position. I was transposed into this exact position. But just to kind of give you an idea. So this would have been very similar to my game, and actually pretty much exact. And this was a game that was played 2 different times by Yusupov and Karpov. So Yusupov white, Karpov black, and both times Karpov won. One of them was in 1993, one of them was in 1989, so a little bit more classic. And those 2 games are the key games that I remember whenever I played a specific line, because those were the first kind of games that I saw that had this specific pawn structure in it. So I really like that. But like bishop e3, I kind of know that since Karpov played g6, it's okay. Since Karpov delayed his d6, it's okay. So for example, in one of the games, Karpov took and then just got d5 and kind of got these trades going on and went to this endgame. I wouldn't do it Just because I don't trust my own endgame skills doesn't mean anything about the game. I would rather keep the queens on and focus on those two. So I play better when I have more material, so I wouldn't do that, but Karpov did, so if you want, you can. Another game that Karpov played, actually a couple of years before that, was knight d6, totally fine. And Yusupov took, he took, ooh, a lot of takes. And he got a lot of attacks going on, but it didn't really pan out, and this ended up a win for Karpov, and this was a very important tournament. It was the candidates in 1989, so... I think probably Karpov played this in like 1989, and he was like, you know what, let me switch it up for the next game, so... I don't know the exact details of that. Anyways, I said that so I can show you what happened in the game. So, my opponent played knight g3, I played g6. You see, it kind of turned out the exact same. Although, he could have considered taking, and that was another game that... that was actually a game that Carlsen Naka played, right? That 2020 Carlsen Tour final. So, he played knight g3, I played g6, he played bishop e3. And here I was like, look, I really don't feel like taking over here. I definitely could have, and that was another game that was, actually that was two games that was played with Yusupov as white. So these are again all 90 something games. So Yusupov played this. This was a game that Yusupov had with Karpov, right? And there was another game that Yusupov didn't have with Karpov, surprise. And his opponent played knight a5. I can only assume that it's playing on c4, which is totally fine. But Yusupov went on to win this. Again, personal preference, I would rather avoid the endgame shenanigans as long as possible, so I just didn't get into it. Knight a5 would have also been interesting. And if take, rook f2, I think this was also a nice choice. And I could have considered like b5s maybe, and then this would be like a relatively weak pawn. Maybe long term I could try to attack that pawn. But for me, I was like, I don't really want to put myself in a dangerous situation. So I played queen e7. I was still holding up hope to play knight d6. So I got that going. And with knight d6, that would bring an extra attacker, right? So I think that's why my opponent played e5. To be honest, I don't think e5 was the best move. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask, what do you guys think white should have done here? e5 does stop knight d6, but I don't think that's really helped as much. I'm gonna catch up on the chat reading. Ooh, I got someone watching from Philippines, nice. I see a lot of d5 scares me. I agree. Oh, d5 for white? Well, that, you know what? That actually does kind of scare me. I think d5 is definitely worth consideration. Even if you're not going to do it immediately, you definitely need to think about it. All right. Let's see. I think I'm going to give it another couple of seconds just to kind of make sure everybody is on the same page. Sorry. Anybody feels like they need more time? I really can't see faces, that this is too bright. Okay, I saw the thumbs up. That's good. I see another thumbs up.
Is d5 not your choice?
I think d5 is pretty good, actually, because d5 is very forceful. The thing with d5 is I don't necessarily have to take, and I will most likely just go knight a5 and start attacking. And even if you go queen a4, I may just go up here. So what I was considering potentially was maybe take queen a4 to kind of stop, knight a5 ideas. Ooh, T. Yay, thank you. So I think that would have been a very interesting way to try and play it. So I like this queen a4 idea just because it messes up with my plans. So yeah, that was probably something I would consider. And after take, now maybe e5 or like queen a4, or you know what? I would most likely consider this more seriously, but let me see what Big Brother says. Yeah, take queen a4, yeah. These ideas, because I definitely want to go knight a5. Actually, maybe queen a4 first. I agree. I remember this was something I thought about during the game. Because I don't have this anymore, you'll just take it. And I don't really have this, because you'll take that. So, I take queen a4 or take. Those two would be my unhappy stuff. So, my opponent was relatively generous, and he just played e5. Now, this doesn't mean he's not going to take it. So I was like, you know what? Let me just do this knight a5 before he starts taking and go queen a4s. And he played queen e2. Queen a4 was probably still possible, but now I may try to get a little bit more comfortable with this take, and then like rook c8. Especially since this pawn is now pinned, you can definitely try to stop the attack. But I would still want to consider this more seriously, especially since there may be some d5 ideas. You can't really take. You may have to take here, which means my knight also joins the party. Having said that, I may also consider d5 right now, because you can't take, right? And if you take, then I take with the knights. I still have to deal with this though, so I think there's some calculation to be done here, but this definitely makes me happy. Okay, yeah, I mean, Patrick, that's fair. Understanding Nimzo positions is really tricky. So it's really important to try to go back to classics, find a good video that works for you, because it's not all engine-based. Some of these like moves with knight e8, for example, delaying your d6, these are not necessarily something that engine could tell you. A video or a book could do that a whole lot more. That's kind of why when I'm teaching my students, I'm usually like, okay, so when you're trying to learn the openings, don't start with engine. Start with a mixture of like videos, just like half-hour video, then try to go through and input those video moves into like Licha study. That's usually the most convenient way. And then do like a mix of master games, and then start to include like engine as like a last line of thing, just to make sure everything is nice and good. But you never want to start with engine. Unless you're playing like a super cool, weird line that is only engine. Can help you, and there's not like a lot of videos or master games that can help you, so that you kind of have to know everything engine says. Anyways, queen e2. So, question for audience. What do you think we should do? Probably no more d5s immediately, so what else? What could we do now?
Rook c8.
Yeah, that's actually what I played too. It makes a lot of sense if you remember the little like foreshadow that I did early on in our lecture. I did mention the idea with rook c8, and it would kind of give you the possibilities to start attacking on c4. So that is doing that right now. You may very well try to I want to start eating on c4, so I'm forcing my opponent's hand to either try to play this rook c1, which is uncomfortable, because this rook c1 also leaves this pawn hanging, so I may take. You don't really have this rook c1, because I have knight b3, so even just psychologically, I am giving my opponent a really, really hard time, because opponent now has to actually deal with a lot of like potential threats that I have, and opponent doesn't have a whole lot of potential threats. Opponent doesn't even have attacks on the king side anymore since they closed it up. They can't do h4, kaboom. They can't really, this knight here is also looking a little silly, even if they like relocate it, which is a good idea for them to do at some point. The g4 won't necessarily work either, because I won't take, I'll just stay here. That's another reason why e5 is not necessarily the best choice in this game. And generally, when you are trying to resolve the tension in the center, you need to be very, very careful, because with the tension in the center, you may very well lock it up for worse, or take something when it would only hurt you in long term. So tension in the center is a beautiful gift for you. So just learn how to use it. So it's not always easy, but tension in the center is a very big topic, and that is something that I actually see a lot of my students have problems with too. So yes, so rook c8 was cool, and my opponent kind of felt like, all right, well, I gotta just take it, because if I don't, this pawn will be, if they didn't take it, I would take and c4 would fall. So he took, I took, and now I'm like, well, I can't really get my knight to d6, and my rook on c8 is feeling a little silly, but I do have a potential new cool spot for my knight. Boom, boom, boom. So I started to calculate pretty much immediately as I took. I was like, whoa, that pawn on b6 is gone now, so I have that square for my knight. So I already talked about how much I don't calculate when I play chess. Oh my god, people shouldn't hold me accountable for this video, but I don't do as much calculation because I like to try to play more comfortably. And if I'm sitting here and calculating, maybe I can do g5, you take, maybe I can do like this crazy line here, I would most likely not play the crazy line, and I would much rather play a more strategic approach that I would have a little but sure advantage, rather than a super crazy line that I may get like a cool tactic out of it, but maybe not. So this doesn't mean I don't calculate. Of course I calculate this whole line, and I also see that I may have potentials for there, I see potentials there, but it's more about noticing those potentials and having better observation skills rather than sitting here and squeezing my head and calculating for 40 minutes. Although having said that, I did run into time trouble in this game, so we'll get there too. So I did give you that little insight into my brain to kind of wrap it up with the way I approach chess in the last couple of years is more related to how the position changed rather than just kind of staying hyper-focused on making super cool plans. So I've become way more flexible with my planning. So just because I wanted to go up here and I can't do it anymore, I'm not gonna get like upset. I'm not gonna get hyper-focused on maybe I can go d6, maybe I can go d5. I do still keep those ideas in mind, but I won't get obsessed over them, if that makes sense to you guys. So for me, noticing that this pawn structure changed, I immediately go for, ooh, open file, ooh, b6 square. So those are the things that I noticed immediately rather than starting to calculate, maybe I can take, maybe there's a cool tactic, stuff like that. Okay, so it's a good idea to try to understand how to develop those techniques about how the position changed for better or for worse, what changed for your opponent, what new weaknesses, this is a new weakness because they're double isolated pawns, what new strengths for them. This is technically an open file and semi-open file, so this may be something they can work on, this specific pawn. So yeah. So opponents tried to grab this open file, good for them. I was staying with my plan, I was staying with my plan, I was staying with my plan. And opponent got there in time to protect their pawn, but I got the chance to kick that rook away, and now I'm attacking this guy. And now I got rook b8. d5 would also have been a really cool choice, because if take, I would have c4 options. So they would probably take over here, I could take with queen, and it would resolve my d-pawn issue, and it would give me more opportunities. So I think this would, if I was playing this game again, I would consider d5 more seriously, but rook b8 made a lot of sense for me. Even when I played rook b8, I didn't think I'm winning. I knew that I have a lot of pressure, and I knew that my opponent is probably extremely uncomfortable, because I have like rook b2, knight b2, potential knight b3, I could just wait and double up the rooks, and this is not comfortable. Just to show you, I'm going to flip the board. Would you rather be white or black? Any white takers? Anybody want to be white? I see some head shakes. I see a very funny frown, I think. Yeah, so Ah, thank you, Brian Clark. Hey, Brian Clark, it's been so long. I am sister of Dorsa Derakhshani. There's very few of us with the same last name. Actually, that's not true. Very few of us in chess in the same last name. Yeah. Okay, so having talked about all of those, my opponent was probably feeling extremely under pressure too. So he just was like, you know what, buddy, I'm just gonna pull back. I don't know if he was worried about my knight b2 or my rook b2 or my pawn d5. I don't know what he was worried about, you know, specifically, but he just went back rook c1, which gave me rook b2 options, knight b2 options, potential knight b3 options. So I'm gonna take a second and ask you to kind of calculate what would you want to play here as black. I know I just gave you a whole spiel about how much I don't calculate a whole lot, but this is one of those moments that you do need to find some time and energy to calculate. So the best way to try to calculate though is to figure out like candidate moves. So knight b2, definitely candidate move. Rook b2 is a candidate move. Knight b3 is a maybe for me because my knight on a5 feels better than their knight on d2. And to be also completely transparent, I don't think Engine is going to give me a whole lot of advantage. Probably very little, maybe 0.05. I don't think it's going to be anything more than that. But I was banking a whole lot on my opponents making funny mistakes because the amount of pressure that I was putting them under, he should have broke, and he did. So try to also give your opponents the benefits of they will crack under pressure. So keep that in mind as well. Trading knight for bishop, so I'm assuming you're considering knight b2? Probably. Sorry. Yep, I don't speak Spanish, but I can see d6 something central. Yes.
Rook b2 almost hangs a pawn, and almost takes his pawn, I think.
So you don't like rook b2?
No, rook b2 gains the pawn of black, not loses the pawn, I think.
So actually tell me, what do you think is white's best move after rook b2?
I think they rejected
Oops.
the drop it on your back.
Well,
Could be my hair too. Thank you.
if white did nothing, and then you get knight b3, which is just probably winning.
True. So probably they have to move the queen somewhere.
Yeah.
Or play rook b1.
Well, that's not winning because they could just.
Sorry?
It's not winning yet because they could just challenge knight b1.
Possibly.
No, because it's.
This is a very strategic position, so if you need an extra minute, that's totally cool. I actually think I spent about 15 minutes here, so this was a classical game, an hour 30. Oh, scary thoughts. Knight takes c3. Oh. No, not yet. I'm getting a lot of knight b2s and rook b2s in the chat. Actually, I don't think doing stuff with the d7 pawn is a bad idea. I don't think it's the right time just yet. So, I'm gonna go ahead and say I played knight I played knight b2 and I was very pleased. Engine, as I said, like this is not the best engine ever, but it's still, I mean, it's giving black comfort level, but it's not really giving advantage. Like it's saying maybe rook c8, maybe knight b2. I'm assuming it's probably also going to give me some like rook b2 at some point, I guess, or not. But I liked knight b2. Rook b2, I thought that queen f1 or like queen e1 or even queen d1 would be ideas that would be a little annoying. So I didn't really go for that. I, however, did go for knight b2. Now, my idea with knight b2 is, to be honest, very uncertain. I'm attacking, but I have no intentions of taking it just yet. If you allow me, I may try to eat this pawn, but if it's my move again right now, like if you just play like a waiting move, I'm not going to take this. I may choose for d5. Let me actually close this up. But if you play queen f5, which is something I saw over the game, I was like, oh man, if you play queen f1 and we're going to go like bishop e2, I don't really have a good follow-up move. This does not mean that I'm unhappy with my position, but I was just not sure what to do. So I was kind of banking on my opponents playing it a little weird, and no, good luck, good for me, they did. They did make a mistake. My opponent just kind of gave up on this pawn. I'm assuming because they missed out on queen f1, or they didn't realize that they were not like losing. They were a little bit more uncomfortable, but because of the amount of pressure that I have over them and because of how uncomfortable this is for them, and they don't actually have pretty much any threats against me, I'm assuming that's why they kind of broke under the pressure. So, having said that, I'm kind of circling back to chess and psychology. I know Dennis is doing it now, and I'm sure he's a super teacher, but chess and psychology is my baby. So I always thought that that's a good way to try to think about chess. That is not, you're not playing a game, you're playing the person. So try to make sure that you give the person enough opportunity to mess up. And I did. I thought knight b2 would give my opponents the most opportunity to mess things up. So knight b2, he played bishop c2, I ate. I think Engine wanted me to ate with this, but I just took it with that. And I just pulled back, I'm attacking, and I realized that I may try to trade things off a little bit. I momentarily considered like this take, and I was like, well, I don't really know how to continue. I may have like some specific threats, maybe this, maybe that. And then I was like, you know what? I have an extra pawn. I did what I wanted. I managed to get that pawn. It's okay to kind of regroup. And my opponent played pawn c4. So here I actually have a choice to make. I can try to go on c3 square, or I could choose this to eat this pawn. Which one do you think would be more comfortable? Sorry?
Taking pawn,
That's what I did too.
because otherwise you only have the knight defending it,
Mm-hmm.
bishop is going to drop back. No, actually, no, we can't do that. So
If you go c3, you can redirect to e4.
That is also possible. So there's a lot of good choices to make. I think my issue with knight c3 was potentially if queen to c2, this might be a little bit of an issue for me, potentially, long term. And I thought if I like try to regroup, maybe like bishop b5, I thought this might become a little uncomfortable. Again, let me call on the big brother. No, they like knight c3, never mind. Ignore what I said. Knight c3 was totally fine. Actually, the Engine likes it more. I wanted to eat the pawn because I thought long term this would give me more comfort. And my opponent played queen e3, and I just went for simple tactics that I saw at this moment. I just took, because my point is if they take, If they take, I'm gonna give check, I'm gonna eat that, and whoops, and I am very happy with this trade. So I went for it and I was happy. And of course I have 2 extra pawns, so my opponent didn't take it. He took on f4, and I started to kind of push over here. I think this was a little overambitious. I should have just went rook d3 to try to maybe go rook d4 or try to like get rid of this pawn, because this pawn will be a big problem. I went g5, and then I just kind of tried to regroup this knight, which they're all like healthy moves, but they give my opponent like opportunity and opportunity. I should have just played rook b2 here. And if we trade off the rooks, that's totally fine. If we don't trade off the rooks, where are you going to go with your queen? You go the other way? Cool. I may even try to attack you, because this would be a pretty cool attack. Or I may just pull it back. I think knight b6 was a little extra prophylactic, so it wasn't really cool. So, again, like here, something like pawn a6 may have been a little bit more comfortable, because if you take, then maybe I can try to eliminate this pawn, because the majority of my pawns are in this side, so that's the side that I will be playing in long term. But I just played like f4, and it felt nice because I was like, this is a very annoying pawn. If I can get rid of it, I'll be great. Queen g7 would have been a nice choice too. So after f4, my opponent played rook e1, I went f3, and he played rook e3. So, question. What do you think we should do here? There are a couple of things that are totally good to do. Which one do you think would be the best? I miss tea. I also agree, Yasser does usually take the pawns. Yeah, to be fair, rook takes rook would have been sweet, simple. I don't know why I didn't do it. I tried to keep my trend of let's trade off more, and I took over here, and I went over here, and I took over there, and then I was like, why did I just do that? Because now you have 2 pawns that may cause me some harm. Why did I just give my opponent that extra opportunity? So it would have been so much more comfortable if I just take over here, and I just push over here, or take over here, or whatever. The bishop is not going to be active pretty much ever. My knight is happy where it is. The knight is protecting over here, attacking over here, protecting this, so your bishop can't go. This is a perfect knight. I mean, it's paralyzed, but so is your bishop. So I'm happy with that. I should have played that, but I was in time trouble, so I just kind of rushed into trading stuff off more and more. And then I was like, ugh, this is so bad. Again, engine is still giving it a good chunk of advantage, just giving it -3, pretty much because I have like 2 extra pawns. And I should have taken, but I didn't, and I just pushed. And then I was again like, oh my god, why am I doing this? I had some ideas here. I was like, look, if I can get my queen to this diagonal, or if I can get my queen somehow to eat this guy and go back here, I'm gold. And then I was like, well, how is that ever going to happen? My queen is stuck to these. This pawn is definitely gonna fall sooner or later, so how am I planning on activating this? So I was like, okay, let's go protect this guy, attack this guy, step by step. We'll come up with the next plan. Opponent played rook d1, and then I was like, okay, let's go over here. And as soon as I played it, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. This was not a good choice. I should have simply tried to stay with my plan to go attack this pawn. I went queen g7 to attack e5, and opponent took, and I took, and again, we were both playing on seconds here, so it was really hard to actually find the time to calculate. But question, if opponent trades off the queen, is that good or bad for them? They do have like 2 less pawns at the moment.
I think good.
Why?
Because then they can gobble up d7 and they're attacking. They're on the 7th rank and they can attack pawns.
They would lose b5 and most likely a3, but yes. It would be terrible for me. Yes. As soon as I took that, I was like, wait a second, I didn't calculate the rook endgame. Because if they take, rook takes d7, rook takes b5, rook takes a7, what am I gonna do? Like rook b2, and then my king is stuck, their king is stuck, that would be a draw. But my opponent also didn't figure it out in time, and he just kind of went ahead and gave this check. Sorry. Hold on. My opponent just went ahead and gave this check. And I think they missed this rook f8 idea. They thought maybe I move up and they take, and no, not today. And my opponent took over here, defending this, but I finally got my queen edge too. And now I knew I'm good. Now I know I'm winning. But this was a good kind of wrap up of the game. But it got really scary for a minute there because I simply miscalculated, actually not miscalculated, but I kind of like gave my opponent too many opportunities. He resigned here, if I'm not mistaken. I gave too many opportunities around, like this trade, like this was, like they should have taken it, I should have taken this. A little back here, like this bishop is not a good bishop. Why would I relieve this bishop off why would I just kick it off? I should have just taken over here and kept these guys here and just take over here. That would have been so much more comfortable because my d7 pawn would be very well protected with a knight. Another thing that I started to kind of mess up a little by little, nobody's attacking any of these guys. I do not need knight b6. I don't know why I played it. I could have simply just played rook b2. Put the rook on the second rank, see how things go. G5 was fine, but like there were a lot of like little moves like that. Or like actually here, I think, knight takes g2 would also be interesting. Because if take, then I could take over here. And I mean, this is fine too, but I thought knight f4 pawn would be more worth it. But you see, like little by little, I started to give my opponent advantages. So I didn't really like that. I didn't like how I gave my opponents opportunities to make me regret my life choices. Yeah, so this take would have been devastating. I think that would have made my scholarship be questioned. But anyways, so I managed to kind of get a hang of it and use this specific pawn a whole lot. But yeah, just because you don't necessarily need to calculate as much doesn't mean you shouldn't. There are points that you do need to still calculate. But I think the main thing that I played in this game was I mainly played my opponent and I really put him under a lot of pressure. So that definitely gave me a lot of the points. And I really liked that I handled the opening very well and the middle game. So as soon as I got the pawn, though, I started to kind of get a little bit more I don't want to say careless, but I think I got too like in my head, and I was like, I want to make sure that I keep those pawns, and I want to play more careful. So that's probably something that I would try to do differently. And yeah, but overall, it was a cool game. I like this game. So big recommendation: make sure to definitely follow, subscribe, all those. But after you do that, I have a playlist of like 100+ videos that I've done previously for the chess club, so go start watching those. And I think the first one is the other one that I've done, a giant Nimzo opening / game. So if you liked this video with the specific pawn structure, make sure to watch the other one too. And I will be back on YouTube for a big chunk of time in like second half of May and early June, so watch out for that. But yeah, besides that, it was a pleasure being here today, everybody, and I hope to see everybody soon again.